reductions that are on the table at the moment are certainly well under what the science is saying we should be talking about. Scientifically, if you look at all the climate models and all of our understanding of past climate change, we need to be reducing carbon dioxide emissions by about 40% by 2020. At the moment, many of the targets are around 5 or 6%, so there's a big gap between what's being considered and what the science would say we should be aiming at.
So I've seen Australia talking about 5 to upwards of 25%, but you don't think that's high enough?
25% would be a very good outcome from this meeting, there's no doubt about that. Obviously, each nation has its own political process to unfold. Starting with a framework to get emissions reductions is the first thing, but really we want to have international engagement at those higher levels. 25% should be the minimum that all developed nations are looking at, because the risks of coming under that are too high. Down the track we'll have climate changes that are significantly more expensive to deal with than acting now and getting reductions in place.
We've seen a huge amount of debate during the conference about 1.5 degrees versus 2 degree rise. Is there really such a big difference? Is this an issue worth such debate about?
Yeah, look, every fraction of a degree warming locks in higher risk of extreme events and changes that are more and more costly. So going for 1.5 degrees is better than going for 2 degrees. Unfortunately, we've probably already locked into 1.5 degrees C warming. We've already warmed by almost 1 degree Celsius, and if we cull our emissions today, we've probably got another half a degree on that. So whilst 1.5 degrees is a laudable goal, it's virtually impossible to achieve without complete shutdown of all industry. And so that's why a lot of scientists are talking about 2 degrees Celsius, because it's probably the most practical target to go for.
So you've released this Copenhagen diagnosis report. In regards to Australia, what are the new information you have about the possible impacts on climate change that we haven't seen before in the IPCC reports?
Well, for Australia, some of the most important differences from the last IPCC report really are around sea level. We have a vast population living at the coast. We have a lot of development right down at a very vulnerable level in terms of sea level rise. The projections for sea level rise are about double what they were in the past IPCC report, and so many of the analyses being done in the context of Australia are based on sea level scenarios that are too low. I know there's been several reports coming out as to the costs that Australia may have to deal with in terms of sea level rise. These are based on sea levels of rising by about 0.5, half a metre by the end of the century. There's a very good chance it's more than a metre. It may get up towards 2 metres if we're unlucky that the ice sheet melt accelerates.
So we've been hearing a lot about political brinkmanship and tactics here at Copenhagen. Do you think that the actual science is getting lost in all the talk here?
Unfortunately, the science has always been lost at these meetings, and I mean, part of the reason for this is that it's a political process that has to unfold. I think many of the negotiators that come to the Copenhagen meeting and have been to previous COP meetings, they understand the science in a relatively simple sense. They know that there's a problem there, but I don't think that the scale of the problem is so clear to all the negotiators. This problem is going to swamp anything like the global financial crisis or swine flu or any of these things that we see immediate action on. Unfortunately, climate change poses its worst and biggest impacts for the generations to come, and so it's way longer than the political electoral cycle, and so it's very tough for politicians to incorporate the science and implement policy when the main benefits will be realised, a decade from now.
And so obviously at the start of the conference we saw the big controversy over the ClimateGate emails. Do you think that was really a big deal, or has it been blown out of all proportion?
Oh, the ClimateGate issue's been blown out of proportion. All of those, there's 61 megabytes of emails there, and they've found 3 or 4 sentences that are being put across the web as proof of climate change science all being a big fraud. Each of those 4 single statements in context makes total sense. There's no scientific fraud going on. This science is absolutely robust, and to have 61 megabytes of emails and find just 4, I was waiting for somebody to have an email that comes along saying, oh yes, they've shown, we're managing to deceive the public yet again with this false science. I mean, this is an absolute smoke and mirrors issue. It's a smear campaign that is, I think, going to backfire on those trying to propagate the story.
And so you're talking about 40 degrees, but that's, 40% emissions cuts, but that's looking very unlikely. What is the best we can hope for?
Yeah. If you think about the fact that since in the last 10 years our emissions have grown by almost 30%, so in 10 years it's gone up 30%, we need them to go down 40%. This is an amazing U-turn in our emissions. I mean, it's unthinkable to me that we would achieve this without action that is far more drastic than anything that's being considered. So I remain optimistic that we can start to make changes, but I don't think that the changes are going to be nearly as rapid as the science says it should be.
And is that just industrialized nations you're talking about in terms of 40%?
Yeah, it's a complicated issue. We need developing nations to also play a significant role. The industrialized nations clearly need to play the lead role, but growth in emissions in some of the developing nations is very rapid, and we need to bring those folks into the negotiations to try to secure reductions in their carbon intensity as well.